please welcome for our keynote to start off this discussion, the President of the Management Board of PKEE and PGE, Wojciech Dabrowski.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be here. I would like to say a few words before the debate in order to outline a bit of the challenge we are going to discuss today. I must note that, unfortunately, energy security has not been Europe's top priority in recent years. During peaceful times, it's easy to forget about security issues. Europe's energy market has been destabilized last 2 years by Russian manipulation and due to the EU vulnerability. As a consequence of this, we face the biggest energy crisis in decades. Currently, no one denies the risk of armed conflict and the threat to critical infrastructure. The pandemic reminded us that capital does have a nationality. Moreover, the full-scale war in Ukraine that has been going on for over a year and the energy blackmail that preceded it have shown the energy resources also have nationality. The question is, how will we respond to these challenges? In Poland, we want to invest more in renewable energy sources and nuclear power plants. For this, we need financial resources and regulatory facilitation on permitting, for example, in environmental procedures. At the same time, the principle of technological neutrality should be applied. Technologies contributing to the climate goal must be treated in a similar way by EU regulations. To ensure constant supply of electricity, we need stable energy generation and safe fuel supplies, reliable grids and energy storage facilities. Our energy systems must be resilient to cyber and physical threats, such as those faced by our neighbors from Ukraine. Another challenge is linked to extreme weather events and the whole topic of climate adaptation, especially water management. The matter is very complex, but one thing is obvious. We need to better prepare to meet new challenges while strengthening energy security for the entire EU and individual regions. Energy security must be the cornerstone of any reforms of the European power system. The diversification of fuel supplies, technologies, and the energy transformation towards climate neutrality are key. We believe that the EU responded to the crisis adequately, but the emergency measures, including the revenue cap, can't be extended beyond the crisis. Otherwise, the objectives of the European Green Deal will not be achieved. The European Commission is aware of this, but other decision makers, the European Parliament and the Council, should also bear this in mind. Without ensuring energy security, it is impossible to achieve climate goals. Energy security is not only about investing in dispatchable generation sources, but also in power grids. Distribution and transmission infrastructure must be in the center of discussion about the effects of the war in Ukraine and energy market design. In conclusion, I would like to remind that the Energy Union should cover 5 closely related dimensions: energy security, the internal energy market, energy efficiency, decarbonization, and research, innovation, and competitiveness. We can't forget about any of them. Taking into account current circumstances, security, solidarity, and trust are crucial as never before. I hope that this dimension will be a pillar of a secure European energy system. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, with a very, very clear message. Europe has almost taken its eye off the ball when it comes to security of supply. Ladies and gentlemen, to debate the future of security of supply and how to ensure it right here, right now, I'd like to introduce our panel. And if you could save your applause for the end, please. We have, and if you'd like to come and join us on stage, Wanda, member of the management board of PKEE, the Polish Electricity Association, also Vice President for Regulatory Affairs at PGE. Wanda, lovely to see you. Michael Lewis, CEO of Uniper. We have just coming on stage now, Elena Giannakopoulou, Director of Strategy at PCC, the Power Corporation in Athens, and Luc Rémont, Chairman and CEO of EDF. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. Thank you so much for joining us for what is, do you know, it seems everything is crucial, and that's almost where we are at the moment, isn't it? It's every single topic or subject you mention, yes, that one's crucial, it's fundamental as well. Let me go along the panel, if I may. Michael, I'll end with you. Elena, I'll start with you. Could you, in just a few words, literally just a few words, what does security of supply mean to you? And the reason I ask this is because some people will put sustainability of green energy, or whether it's finance, whatever it is. So security of supply, in a few words, what is it for you?
It's uninterrupted energy availability at an affordable price. And I think very often we forget the second component.
The affordability has got to be in there. Fantastic. Thank you. What do you think?
Same.
No. That's not allowed.
I'll just compliment. Means anticipation and diversity.
Okay, so actually your security of supply, everything Elena said, but actually you've got to anticipate it and be there first.
And
absolutely.
Be diverse to make sure that you're not reliant on one source.
Okay, so you can pivot very, very quickly. Fantastic. Wanda.
Well, actually, I perceive it through the lenses of the consequences from the customer perspective. So, yeah, it's kind of providing the sufficient amount of electricity at affordable price when it's necessary. So that, in other words, it also means diversification of energy generation, diversification of fossil imports, and no more vendor lock in the future, not putting ourselves in the palm of anyone's hands anymore.
So your security of supply, along the same lines, you've also definitely thrown independence in there for sure. As well. Okay. Yeah. Michael, I left you to the end because I think the room will know this. You've been in the job for, what, 2.5 weeks?
Correct.
Yes. So, very, very much being thrown in here.
I was going to say it's unfair to let me go last because everything's been said, but I would only emphasize some of those points. It's about having the right assets available at the right time to keep the lights on for the right price. And diversity, flexibility, innovation are all part of that, and those are the things that policymakers need to be mindful of. I would also add, of course, that portfolio, that secure portfolio, does need to change and deliver net zero, deliver sustainability, and that transition happens in real time. Every half hour of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, we have to keep the lights on while simultaneously massively transforming our energy system. So I see it as the two aspects. It's absolutely the security of supply and the way that we used to talk about it, i.e. keeping the lights on, but also moving to a completely new energy system.
So you've got two sides of the same coin very much on there. Elena is nodding in agreement. There was one extra word I noticed you had thrown in, which I don't think I heard from the other panelists, and that was innovation. It is, and Luc is agreeing, nodding with that, it is absolutely crucial. There's that word again. But you have to keep moving on. And if you want to pivot, as you're saying, you have to innovate. Ladies and gentlemen, just shout out, is there anything else that you would have put in there in our definition? Or are you happy with the definitions that we have? I think really, really good explanations from our panel. If I could ask you to get your phones out for me, I'm going to ask you all a question. So we'll bring the Slido screen up on stage, if we can. Fantastic, thank you. If you could point, lovely, everyone knows what to do now. Point your phone at the QR code. Brilliant. And it will take us, it should take us straight into a question. Fantastic. Have we all got a question popped up? There we go. So, do you think Europe is energy secure? Okay. Yes, totally. There's no problem here. Not yet, but we are on the right lines. Not yet, and our plans won't help. Or quite simply, not at all. Do you think, somebody laughed at that one.
Funny thing.
Do you think Europe is energy secure? Okay. Before we see the results, Elena, what do you think we're going to see from this audience?
Optimistic audience, so I think that they will go for a not yet, but we are on the right lines.
Okay, Michael's nodding. Yeah, okay. Wanda?
I would be happy to see the result.
Okay. Luc?
Maybe not yet, yeah. Maybe not yet, but we're on the right lines.
On the right lines. Okay. Let's see what our audience voted for. Okay. I would love to know who that 3% was. Who is saying Europe is already totally energy secure?
Oh.
Was it Wanda? That wasn't you? No.
I just realized that I can see here.
Not yet, but we are on the right lines. Okay. Could you just raise your hands if you said not yet and our plans won't help? Who is that? Okay. Yep, few people, not yet, and we're not on the right track as well. Let me go along, starting with you, Michael. How secure? What do you think? How energy secure is Europe? How much do you have to change?
I would completely agree with the assessment there. Not yet, but we're on the right lines. But I think we heard the statistics earlier in one of the talks. You know, if we're to deliver secure energy and net zero, we need an enormous expansion of electricity generation capacity, whilst building up an enormous network of electricity grids to supply our customers. So this is an unprecedented expansion of the energy system, and clearly we don't need as much primary energy when we electrify, but nonetheless, we shouldn't underestimate the size of that challenge, 2 to 3 times increase. And I think generally we're on the right track in that our renewables growth has been spectacular. We've delivered renewable energy which is cheaper than coal and gas. When I started working in renewables 15 years ago, people would laugh at you when you said offshore wind will one day be cheaper than a coal-fired power plant. It is, today, right now. So we can do it if we put the right policies in place. I think the bit that's missing, though, at the moment is the whole question of flexible capacity. You know, I said we have to, security of supply means the right asset available at the right time. And we know that putting more and more inflexible capacity on the grid, i.e. wind and solar, will create times when there's either far too little electricity or far too much. And we have not yet solved that problem of how to create large amounts of flexible capacity at scale for the right price, the other point of security of supply. So I think that's where an enormous amount of focus is needed. We need more flexible generation capacity. In the short term, that will be gas. And then we need a strong roadmap to get to hydrogen as a storage vector. So I think I'd give the position currently a 7 out of 10, on the right track, but there is still more we need to do.
Okay, Luc, I saw you're nodding. Is that a nod in agreement? A 7 out of 10, on the right track, but more to do?
Yes, absolutely. Well, what we need to have over time, and I think this was said very precisely, is to have at the same time security of supply and decarbonation. And that's the addition of the two goals that makes it a unique challenge in history. Of course, electricity is the main vehicle for that. And that's why we need to face over the next decades an unprecedented level of investment, which needs to be both on the power gen capacity, on the grids, and also on the customer side to make sure that we have more flexibility as well. And that's the combination of all of those that is going to contribute at European scale a decarbonated, stable environment with electricity as a vehicle, with, among others, remember electricity is just 1/3 today. There is still 2/3 of energy that is supplied from fossil fuels that need to be decarbonated. That's the biggest challenge that we have to tackle. And for this, any type of generation should be welcome, provided that it is decarbonated, and any flexibility should be welcome, because as we have different mixes of generation, we're going to mix different categories of generation. Some are intermittent and not needing fuel, others are decarbonated and dispatchable, needing fuel, like nuclear, and it's not a bad word to say nuclear, others are also dispatchable and having a natural fuel, which is hydro, and hydro is very often forgotten in the mix of technologies that are needed for Europe. When you bring all this together, plus what will occur on the customer side, which is much more flexible demand and response capacities, if we bring all that together, yes, we have a very good chance to make it happen.
Are you changing your investment strategy? Are you looking ahead in that sort of way and thinking, right, well, everything you've just said, that's now where you are going?
Look, we are already, at EDF, we're already 91% decarbonated in our generation. So, of course, it will be, we are going to 100% over time, thanks to non-fossil fuels for the carbon-generated production in a very small portion that we have today. But moreover, what we need, all of us as power companies, is to bring more of all, basically, because the need is going to increase. So the way we build a market, an environment that enables all of us to do more will be the key question over the next few years.
Elena, do you want to come in there?
The thing is that when we talk about security of supply, the most of the times we are thinking about fossil fuels. Like 90% of the time we will think fossil fuels. And what the recent crisis showed us is that fossil fuels are neither available all the time, nor at the right price, at a low price, because at the end of the day, that's the goal for all the utilities, to deliver electricity at an affordable price. Decarbonization is, on the other hand, so you mentioned it, you said that it's the two sides of the same coin. And it's cheap, solar and wind are getting cheaper and cheaper. But the thing is that this changes the very definition of security of supply. So we are moving from the geopolitics and the risks that come for fossil fuels to technology, supply chain, materials. So it's a very different definition that goes back to the diversification that both Luc and Michael mentioned, but also to the security of Europe. How do you define if we are secure, right? Like Europe, we don't need to be secure at the national level. We proved that during the crisis, but diversification both in terms of technologies, but also leveraging the infrastructure across Europe to bring us together to deliver, it's I think, a significant component of security of supply of the future system.
And are we aware enough of that, Wanda? And can we do that at speed, when is needed?
Well, let me start with saying that I strongly disagree what you said.
Why? Which bit? Which bit?
Like, I'm a little bit less optimistic that our audience is, and this is, you know, the old saying says that we are only as strong as the weakest link. And here we should perceive the link as both member states, national energy security, and different dimensions of energy security. So first, we should assess whether every member state in European Union is reliant, is having strong capacity to provide energy to its customers, or whether not, and how it's going to look during upcoming years, during the green transition time. How we gonna weather the storm, because clearly this is the storm is what our grids and our distribution and transmission network will face throughout transition period. And but also when it comes to different dimensions, that's true. So we are only partially disagree. Because it's like diversification of the electricity generation, which is needed here, diversification of fossil fuels, as I already said, is needed to be here, providing from different directions, and also I believe that our energy mix should remain diversified, not only renewables. We need to somehow balance the system. Why we are not thinking about that right now? We are only focusing on like creating more and more renewables, bearing in mind that storage technology is not there yet to be fully applied and to fully answer to our needs. So, basically, I can terminate here.
No, not at all. No, it's great to hear your views. Do you, and we can hear how passionate you are about them. Could you give us an example of what you feel is going wrong, or the challenges that you feel?
Well, my concern is about our European policymakers' approach, because what I feel that, you know, there is a whole picture on the table, but we are taking care about some issues that we want to take care of for now. We are just picking up very selectively. And we were focusing for years on replacing old centralized energy generation with renewables. But it was clear from the very beginning that once we're going to replace centralized energy generation with decentralized renewables capacities, we will have to have adjusted distribution network, adjusted grid, and we would have to adjust grids, we just adjust transmission network. And it's also already there from the very beginning, the challenges with dispatchable power that we need to provide to our system. And like, what I see is the lack of interest or sufficient interest from the policymakers when it comes to the grids throughout last years. Well, I'm glad that, but only recently it has changed when it comes to the grids. Only recently we started to, but already it become a bottleneck. You know, already we see that not only in Poland, in other countries as well. And we already know that, for example, in Poland, there will be a significant shortage of dispatchable power quite soon if we are going to keep the pace of the green transition. Well, some of you don't believe or have a very bad opinion about Polish green transition, but it's happening. It's happening super fast right now. Only last year, we have 5 gigawatts of photovoltaics installed, and we were ahead of the game when it comes to European Union countries. So that was my comment on it.
So it's the feeling that not everyone is starting from the same place, and that needs to be appreciated. Elena, I can see you nodding. Is that a nod of agreement?
Partially agree. I will partially agree now. We don't all of us have the same starting point, socially, economically, in terms of resources, and we don't have to. That's the thing, we don't have to. But imagining a system that is evolving in a different way from the system that we are used, it's what will take us to net zero. Otherwise, there is a risk that we will expect that technologies will deliver exactly the same things that technologies in the past delivered. And while I appreciate the problems we have with infrastructure, grids, of course, we need to enhance them, we need to improve them, we need to expand them. I think it won't take us far away if we try to bring in technologies that do exactly the same thing today, and they are net zero today. We can achieve a lot with what we already have, while building and investing in the R&D innovation to get the technology that will take us the extra mile.
Okay, Michael, I can see that you want to come in there, it seems like.
Well, only to violently agree, I think, that you know, this question of diversity is really, really important, and the question of flexibility. And I said earlier, it's great the progress we've made with renewable energy. I mean, genuinely exceeded all of my expectations as someone who's in the industry for a long time, and certainly expectations of most commentators. But we mustn't forget that the energy system is a unified system, particularly electricity. And therefore, you need to balance supply and demand in real time. If you don't have the flexible capacity to do that, you will not have security of supply. And it doesn't matter how much renewables you've built. And that's the key point about it happening in real time. So I think we need to ensure that policymakers recognize that gap, and it will be different for each different country. We all start from a different place, but that requirement for flexible capacity will continue to exist for quite some time. And even when we have developed seasonal storage, hydrogen, for instance, you will still need the capacity to turn it back into electricity. So policymakers need to have that in mind as well, and not focus exclusively on one target, e.g. renewables, which is obviously very, very important, but not the only solution. So I think this question of diverse supply, flexible supply, and creating the right incentives for people to innovate is the way we need to move to go from a 7 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10.
Okay. Why then hasn't there been enough focus on storage?
I think because so far it wasn't required. You know, we've built up a large amount of renewables very, very quickly, but we're now getting to the point where we are saturating the system. And when you get more and more inflexible capacity on the system, the value of flexible capacity, the value of storage will increase exponentially.
But
so it's a question of timing.
Shouldn't that have been anticipated more?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the issue, you know. It's like bitter fact here you put on the table also, that until now it hasn't been required. Once the problem is here already, like once we face it, now we are starting to think about it. It's a little bit too late, so.
Well, at the end of the day, you know, there's what is available today, what will be available tomorrow in terms of technologies for dispatchable power generation or storage. The challenge we have today is that the available technologies for dispatchable decarbonated generation are hydro and nuclear. That's what it is today. Tomorrow, there will be hydrogen, there will be others, which will take a place in the mix on the generation side. On storage, what is available today is pumping storage, by far the most efficient at grid scale, and we start to see arising some battery energy systems that are providing some local, not quite grid scale, because we are talking about 100 megawatt-ish. We are not yet, you know, on pumping storage, you can get to gigawatts. So when you store gigawatts, you can offset the volatility or the intermittency of wind farms offshore, for example, or nuclear power plants when they are not needed. So that's fine. Now, do we have enough pumping storage in Europe overall? By far, no. Is there a potential? Yes, we should do more. That's why hydro becomes, again, one of the key elements of the balance of power that we need at European scale. Maybe in the future, technology will continue to evolve, and we can count on it, on the battery energy systems as well, but we are not there yet in terms of ability to generate a storage capacity that would offset, for example, wind generation or solar generation during the intraday or intra-week volatility that we have. So we can count on it. How much can we count on it? That's the question mark. So in the meantime, we need to work on all the aspects. More dispatchable generation, decarbonated, all technologies, and storage at the same time, because this becomes more and more demanding from a balance and flexibility, hence security of supply standpoint.
Let's, you've all talked about, and we've concentrated a lot on the, how can I put it, the known knowns, the things that we know about, the things that we've dealt with, or possibly in some cases should have dealt with over the last few years. Let's look ahead now to the next threat, the next challenge, the next whatever it is coming down the line. A quick show of hands in the room, if I may. Do you believe the energy industry, given everything that you've heard as well, you may have changed your mind, but do you believe the energy industry is prepared for the next threat or disruption, whatever it may be? Please raise your hands if you think the industry is prepared. Okay, gentleman down there. You can raise your hands if you want. I don't want you to feel that you... Well, in that case, then, if you feel the industry is just not prepared at all. The industry is not prepared. I think that's an ear scratch rather than a hand. Yes, okay. And if you're really not sure, it's more a case of let's wait and see. Yeah, okay. What do you think? Elena, is the industry prepared? First of all, I'm not going to ask you what the next threat is. You're very welcome to answer it if you like. Are you prepared? Is the industry prepared?
No. So no, it's what we said. It's what I mentioned earlier, what we discussed. We are changing the very definition of energy security, and we are rethinking the position. So moving to the whole supply chains discussion, the materials and the equipment, and given what we learned from the bottlenecks we experienced with imports of equipment during the pandemic, what the current energy crisis showed us, we have a long way to go. But we have identified the problem. We come from different perspectives here in the panel, but we all agree there is a fundamental transformation. There is a discussion at the policymakers level. There is the Net Zero Industrial Act. We might agree or not with the details, but we can't deny that threats have been identified and discussion is open.
Yeah, okay.
Just a couple of points to refresh where we've come from. Let's not forget that we've been through not one major crisis, but two. First, we had COVID, where it had some very profound effects on the industry. You know, we had to have people sleeping in power plants because they weren't able to leave and form a bubble, you know, and we responded to that really, really quickly without missing a beat. Then we came on to the next crisis where 40% of the European gas supply was suddenly taken out of the supply curve almost overnight. I mean, this is an enormous shock to the system, and yes, it caused a massive challenge in terms of price spikes and all of the associated impacts on customers and affordability in industry and so on and so forth. But actually, the energy industry was able to keep the lights on and keep energy flowing. Now, you might argue we got a bit lucky, it was a bit warm last winter. Nonetheless, we kept the lights on. So I think we've learned a few things, that the industry is extremely resilient, it can respond quickly to crisis, and we've learned a lot of lessons which we can now apply to future potential shocks. The other thing I would say is, the industry I joined in 1993, at least in the UK, was 80% coal-fired power generation. We will close the last coal-fired power station in the UK next year. 30 years sounds like a long time, but to go from 80% to zero and at the same time building up a massive zero carbon renewable shows that over the medium to long term, we can also respond. So I'm very confident that we have the capability to deliver. What we need, though, is a sound policy framework to anticipate the next challenges and allow us to invest and innovate around that policy framework.
I totally take your point that, you know, overnight, everything had to change at the start of the pandemic for so many people. And yes, the lights stayed on over the challenge of the pandemic and everything that we have seen since. But there will be people in this room that say, but have you seen energy prices? You know, there is that, and there is also, but we've been in some countries as well in the position of cut the amount of energy you use. You know, try and restrain, we're not saying that, you know, the lights will go out this winter, but consumers, both industrial and customers, are very, very aware that they have to ration themselves, economically as well as in a supply sense.
Well, like I said, 40% of European gas supply was taken out of the supply curve overnight. That is bound to have a knock-on effect. But what we were able to do is quickly move to diversify. For instance, Uniper built the Wilhelmshaven LNG terminal in 10 months, unprecedented, as a response to that. So the industry did move very, very quickly when required. I think another observation I'd make is we need more of that kind of urgency when we're not in a crisis. You know, we have some real challenges getting infrastructure built, which we know is absolutely necessary for the energy transition, but there's endless challenges in getting approvals and so on and so forth. So I think we need that kind of determination to anticipate the next challenge and to create the environment in which we can build the necessary infrastructure, which will avoid the worst consequences of future challenges.
I think you've just answered my next question, because I was going to say, if you can build an LNG terminal in a matter of months, yeah, why can't everything else go so quickly? Ladies and gentlemen, let's throw this out to the audience. You've heard from our panelists. Is there any other opinion or thought or question that you would like to put to them about security of supply? Can we get a microphone down the front, please? Fantastic. Where are they? Fantastic, lovely. This gentleman here. Anything to do with security of supply? Anything that you have heard or things that you want to talk about? If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first.
Hi, I'm Mihai Darida from MVM, and I have a question which could be a party pooper, basically. In this room, I don't want to be, but when it comes to security of supply in regard to the weather-dependent generation, renewables mostly, so how would you see in relation to climate change?
Yep.
Because we saw in 2021 low wind patterns, we saw low water levels last year when it comes to nuclear or hydro. And how do you think the future system could be resilient enough?
And then I'll also add in there, if I may, the corresponding challenges with agriculture as well, and all of that, with the desire for those raw materials as well. Luc, do you want to take that?
Well, of course, the future is unknown by definition, so the best answer we can provide to that is doing long-term models. So we have detailed long-term climate models that we are stressing ourselves also to determine the resiliency of our supply mix towards the risk that you are describing. What these models are telling us mostly is that, of course, there will be more instability overall, so more uncertainty on basically wind, or more uncertainty on how much rain we will get on a given year. But overall, the amount of water that's going to be poured is not going to change globally. There might be some differences within the territories, but overall, the amount of water is not going to change, because you have more heat, more water goes up and goes down, basically. So the question is where it goes down, and that might change a little bit, of course. So we are projecting all these models as far as we can till 2100. So that's where we are trying to model. And of course, we will adapt ourselves, and we have started to adapt our own power generation models. We have started to adapt our own infrastructures. So cooling water for nuclear power plant, that's something that we are starting adapting already. And of course, the position that we are taking for any kind of generation is taking this into account. So that's the way we prepare ourselves for this. And of course, this is not just ourselves, but all the people we are working with. That's true with the grid, true with the authorities in all the geographies where we are working, are anticipating in this direction.
Anybody else want to add to any of that?
May I just opine? Yeah, you know, going to this discussion that we have about anticipating the future, I come from military family, and there is a saying in the army that usually generals are preparing themselves for the war, for the wars that they already went through. So it says that it's super difficult to be prepared for the future and to anticipate the future, but at the same time, to some extent, it's always possible. And I'm telling this basing on our own national perspective. You know, for years when Germany and most of other countries of European Union were counting on free trade and strengthening market relation with Russia, our society was paying for a new investment, which was LNG terminal. And you know, I don't want to say that we understand geopolitics a little bit better than the rest of the world, but clearly we know Russians much better than the rest of the world. So just basing on that, we need to also say what saved us last winter. It was our national coal and lignite, whether you like it or not. And as we're gonna be phasing out coal and lignite from our energy mix through upcoming years, and replacing this with nuclear and with the gas also, we need to be prepared to create resilience in every other country. We just cannot depend on ourselves, even if, you know, interconnectors and strengthening our internal grid is necessary, because it is necessary in times of crisis. France example showed us this last year, and also, for example, our Rzeszów and Chmielnicki links, which is helping already, which we are reopening right now and gonna help Ukraine, is showing this. But at the same time, please, let's focus, and I'm calling for that, let's focus on building our national strength here.
Michael?
I just add one thing, going back to the point about innovation. I'm very optimistic that when you put the right incentives in place, it's remarkable what can be achieved. And when you look at the technical developments in IT, AI, they enable all sorts of things down at the customer side as well. You know, National Grid in the UK did a program called Demand Side Response over the winter, and by using smart meters that are being installed at scale, they can now ask people to reduce their demand at specific periods in the day, which is the equivalent of 2 gigawatts of capacity. So we are, and if there's any silver lining to come out of the energy crisis, is that customers are much more aware of what energy they consume and how valuable it is. And as a consequence, are much more engaged with their energy suppliers. And this opens up the door to making customers much more flexible as well as residential customers, industrial customers, so that they can play a role in balancing supply and demand in real time. And all of these things, all of these innovations will come provided the right incentives are in place. And I'm absolutely sure that if we get that policy framework right, we can deliver it right across Europe.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to this gentleman first, and then there's one over there as well, and then we'll come to you.
Hello, this is Vijay Betanbatla. I lead the power segment at SLB, which was previously Schlumberger. Thanks for a great conversation this morning. So Wanda and even others mentioned diversity on the supply side quite a few times. We touched on energy storage. I mean, outside of renewables, that's the diversity that we're talking about, right? So storage, a little bit about demand response, but what other supply side sources do we have that are not going to exacerbate the climate impact. That
What else?
yeah.
What else is there that you can throw at this equation?
Well, of course, hydrogen will come one day. Is it today in the market in terms of ability to generate hydrogen from electricity to generate again electricity? Not quite. So maybe if we look ahead a couple of decades, it will be there. So one day, innovation will bring additional technologies, of course, and we need to continue to work on this. So we have to work on what we have today so that we face the challenges of the moment, and at the same time work on alternative sources of storage. And of course, companies like yours are well placed to try and find the best way on how we build an entire new supply chain, by the way. That's something that needs to be end-to-end, again, like we have in other technologies today. And with this perspective, we might have one additional source of storage in the future that today is not completely available in economic terms.
Sorry, just to confirm, you said hydrogen in the next couple of decades. That's your timescale.
If we are talking about something that it takes a meaningful space in terawatt hours on the power plate of Europe, it might take that, yes.
Yeah.
And again, we have to start looking at how we convert our existing infrastructure. We have large amounts of gas storage in Europe. Uniper has 80 terawatt hours of gas storage. We're already looking at, can you convert that to hydrogen? How would you do it? What would be necessary? So that we can anticipate what is coming down the line. It goes back to the point again, we need to be thinking now, 15 years into the future, what kind of infrastructure will we need to store the necessary terawatt hours, and it is terawatt hours of energy. And that's why it's so important we get that policy framework right.
You mentioned hydrogen. Biomethane figuring in any? Yeah, okay. Gentleman over there, please. Thank you.
Hi, Aurélien Schwartz, CEO of Metroscope, part of the subsidiary of EDF, actually. My question is very easy and follows the previous one, which is there's one available technology that is capture carbon and storage for power generation assets. And in every scenario today, nobody ever spoke about if we cannot phase out fossil fuels plants, do we need to rely on CCS? I just came back from the US, and they speak a lot about that. The IRA Act is also subsidizing carbon capture and storage. So my question is, why nobody is speaking about it?
I can speak about it. I'm happy to talk about it. I absolutely think we should keep all of our options open. We don't yet know exactly what the winning technologies will be. We need to create a framework which allows innovation, allows companies to try different technologies, and I think carbon capture is definitely one, certainly may be needed before a hydrogen economy is developed at scale. So we are certainly looking at that as far as our existing gas assets are concerned as to whether that could be a possible solution. And in the end, though, it's all got to be about the fundamental economics. Everything has to directionally take us where we get to the lowest cost decarbonized solution by 2050.
I build on that from pure experience of the company, which is in the transition process, but still has a lot of lignite and coal in the portfolio. I can tell you that I do agree what you said, that we should keep all our options open, but at the same time, working for a company like this, I can tell you that we just cannot rely on the future technology that is not here yet. Why is that? Because we have to invest a lot into renewables at the same time paying a lot for EU ETS allowances. So we cannot put at risk our finances because, for example, this technology will not be delivered on time and will not save us from paying for EU ETS allowances. So that's the reason why we are not focusing on it right now.
Okay, thank you. One question down here. Thank you.
Can Ercan, energy advisor from Turkish permanent delegation to the EU. Well, there's a big paradigm shift. Today we see it's net zero emissions. And the last time in our continent, we saw this shift from oil to natural gas. So that created a dependency. But this time, today, when we look at this big paradigm shift, we see that critical raw minerals and raw materials are quite important and they play a pivotal role. But we do know that in Europe, we don't have reserves. We don't have mining schools. We don't have mining workers. So do you think this huge paradigm shift and the requirement for a super cycle for critical raw minerals will lead to vulnerabilities in this new energy supply security, energy security paradigm argument? And if yes, how are we going to do it?
Well,
thank you.
Before you answer, it's a huge area. We've actually got a panel tomorrow all about it, from mine to meter tomorrow. So we are going to concentrate on that. Make sure you're here for that. The app, everyone I hope has downloaded the app. It has the whole agenda on it. It is a huge area, though. You're looking at cobalt. So, and you look at countries like China that are now actually mining within the DRC so that they have their production there. Very, very briefly, is this on your agenda? And if so, how high up on your agenda is it?
You mean on our agenda, like we are utilities, in the sense that we are thinking
about it,
new collaborations, new relationships, and new partnerships that we have to develop. But I made this comment during this panel so many times, so I will, I will give time to my...
Yes, very high.
Thank you.
Very high as well.
Likewise.
I hope that answers your question. I know your second question was, what do we do about it? Come back tomorrow. Okay, fantastic. And do you know what? I'm going to squeeze in one final question, if we can, just over there. Let's dash a microphone around to you. Brilliant, lovely. Final one.
I'll be quick. Karen Kalbani from Alternex Energy. I know all of you said that like flexibility, storage, electrification is all going to play part of the, a stable and secure energy system. And you said that incentives are key for like industry, for example, to take part. But how realistic is that we get like a framework in place that will make it equal across the EU member nations? To not say we're going to invest here in this nation and in another. How realistic is that to achieve it?
That's a huge discussion. Yes. All right. Realistic. I'm just going to ask you, because of time, if you could just give me like a 1 out of 1 to 10. How realistic?
That's a tricky one. Maybe I'm not going to give a 1 to 10, but I'll say, of course, it's totally unrealistic to ask for perfection. It's not at all unrealistic to ask for a system which moves us forward in the right direction, which we can incrementally adjust, which is how the EU has always worked.
I just think that our audience doesn't make it any easier, this panel. But responsibly answering, I have no idea. It's super difficult to assess.
Yeah.
Maybe the way I would phrase it is to say we are companies here. On the panel.
Exactly.
We are not policymakers. The way policymakers can help companies to make the right decisions in the direction that you were calling is to have stable framework, as much as possible technology agnostic, with a clear goal, which is security of supply and decarbonization. That's something that companies can work on, with the addition of market rules that are shooting for the long term. If you put this in the hands of companies, companies know how to behave on this. And then, of course, there are differences of situations across Europe, and that can be taken into account into local policies. But at least if we are able to have a common framework that agrees on the decarbonization journey, the fact that we want security of supply and that we have reasonable long-term market vision that helps companies to make decisions of investment and protects the consumers against the volatility of the short term, I think we are in the right direction. There is a lot of good things that are already in the current discussions at European level in that direction. That's my view.
Okay.
I'm fully covered, completely.
Okay. that I think is a good place to end. We have covered an awful lot and some really interesting thoughts, views and opinions. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank my panel. Thank you.